Well, one thing's for sure, we're not talking about Ferrari today. We're talking about Corvettes. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Before we crack open this really cool Shale Gibson Les Paul case, I think we need to do a little bit of history so you guys fully understand what we're dealing with today. There's nothing more American than cars, guitars, and sports. Today we're talking about cars and guitars, specifically between Gibson and Chevrolet. In 1995, those two companies first worked together to create 1960 Corvette Les Pauls. They produced them in all of their famous colors, they had the really cool body vent / door design, and those are incredibly collectible guitars yet today. Later on in that year, they also produced 1963 Corvette Stingray SGs. They had the Stingray inlay all up the fretboard, and those things are extra weird because they just have a neck pickup, it's a wrap tail. If you're wondering what this design is, it's the split rear window that the Stingrays are well known for. Basically, you looking at the car from the back. And these were birthed in the very beginning of Gibson's promo guitar era. We've talked about things like Donzi Speedboat Les Pauls, Fruit of the Loom Underwear, the Hawks, Coors Light, the Pauls, as well as Bud Light Standards, among many of others. And that promo era was basically the late 90s into the early mid-2000s. That's not to say they don't still make things today like the Lexus Les Paul, but that was the big time. And if we've learned anything, usually these promo guitars are worth less than whatever they were created after. Because, you know, it's kind of cheesy playing an advertisement guitar, but not all of them are exactly the same. And that's where these Corvette ones fall under, because there is a cult niche following of the brand, kind of like the Playboy ones. And Gibson actually released these as limited edition runs. They weren't just promotional guitars necessarily. More like a signature guitar for a car, and they're collectors. So what we're looking at today is actually the third one between Gibson and Chevy, and it is the 50th anniversary Les Paul Doublecut. Yeah, this thing has got some weird specs that we need to go over. So let's go ahead and capture the most obvious spec that makes these things unique. You have this strange design. This is actually a carved top DC special. They're not usually like that. So look at this, and now look at the car. Just like the initial Corvettes, this one was designed to also look like the body vent that's on the door. Here's a Billy Joe Jr. I have for comparison's sake here. They're usually flat slab bodies, but you can tell that this one is just completely sculpted differently. Even in like the pickguard areas, this is no longer a blocky looking guitar. It is very rounded. It's to match the car's contours. But on top of that, if you look at it this way, the whole guitar has a little bit of a carved top to it. It's not just this design area. That's why I always thought this thing had, but it's actually thicker than a regular one too. So I always thought this one was kind of lame in comparison to the full-on Les Paul, but now that I have it in my hands, you know, I can appreciate it a little bit more. But besides just being the promo era of Gibson, this is like the beginning of them doing a whole bunch of carved guitars. Carved tops have been on Les Paul since their introduction. However, art carving was very new at this time. One of the most famous examples is the Snakepit, first done up in 1996. That's when Bruce Kunkel was the head carver and his apprentice at the time, T.C. Harrison. So these 90s model art carved guitars are always a little bit special for that reason. Next up, it still features dual P90 pickups, soap bar in style. You've got a Nashville style bridge, but look at that. It's also a string through body construction. So they had a route out an area on the back of this thing too to put your strings through. They actually go at an angle. That's cool. I've never seen that before. Next up, we have the badge that adorned all of these 2003 model ones, but specifically the anniversary ones got it all over the interior. So to have an anniversary version of the car, you need that everywhere, and you definitely need the guitar to be a part of it. So that's kind of a quick overview of what's special on our front. Now we get to our fretboard, and it just has Corvette all up and down it. But would you look at that? This model actually has 24 frets. Never realized that. And this is a very special red finish. They called it Anniversary Red. It's the same color they used on the car, which has a red base coat, and then they put a red tinted lacquer over top of it. So kind of like the Widowed series, but it's red on red, kind of creating a candy apple effect. And now if we go to the interior of the car, that's when the case is going to start to make sense. The interior looked like the exterior of the case, so that's what they were trying to blend in here. So you got the Anniversary Red with the shale interior. It's definitely a nice combination. And apparently these things initially came with a glass shadow box that you could use as a display. Personally, I've never seen one, but usually that's the way it goes. They give you a display case and the initial guy who has the guitar keeps it and doesn't sell it with it. And then as far as the headstock goes, they didn't do anything too crazy up here. It's just regular Gibson mother of pearl without any additional branding. As far as the back, you get a custom shop decal, and then your serial numbers are kind of cool on these. They make it look like a car's VIN number, which is basically a car's version of a serial number. Then for the back, besides what we already talked about and the contoured edges, it's not all that different. But the initial price of these was just under $10,000. But they created 50 of these for the 50th anniversary of the Corvette model. So these were in 2003, so that means it was 1953. So the Les Paul model itself, not the double cut version, was celebrating its own 50th anniversary just 1 year prior to these. So that was part of their whole marketing material. We understand what you guys are going through and how proud you are. But what's extra cool about this one, this is the last one made, number 50. It works out great. 50, 50, 50. There was another Chevy guitar model known as the Chevy SSR. It kind of looks like an ES339 or something similar, but apparently that was a one-off that was given to the person who bought that car or something. But now for an additional fun story. This actually sold on Reverb 2 years ago, and the then owner of it was actually one of my dealer friends. So when a viewer of the show reached out to me to see if I'd be interested in purchasing this, I was like, hey, I know that guitar. Now, unfortunately, when he shipped the guitar to him, the big paper COA was tucked away in the box in a separate envelope, and it accidentally got thrown away. So I do have a photo of the COA, but all we have left is actually the pre-packed checklist over here. But oh well, I've been wanting to document one of these anyways, so let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. After a deep clean, this is just like a whole brand new guitar, so let's take a look at what makes this thing tick, starting with our pickups. What's really interesting is the cover is like so tight. It was hard to get this thing off. I'm going to struggle to get it back on. That's just your regular one with your typical markings. And I was kind of curious if we'd find like P100s in here, but no, it's just your regular P90s. And our bridge pickup is exactly the same. No stickers as per usual in this era. But within the circuit, the bridge is 8.06 k ohms, the neck position is a little hotter at 8.14, and the middle, just for fun, 4.11. Here's what the neck pickup cavity looks like. You can see the long neck tenon that runs there, and that's where the P90 mounts into it. I'm not quite sure why they put this route there, because it doesn't really make any sense, because there's no wires that go through it or anything. In fact, it's really strange how the wire just kind of has a very small channel under here. It's kind of an afterthought, it looks like. But then looking in our bridge pickup cavity, you can tell that route in this case does make sense, because that's where the wire channeling goes. And the rest is just about the same, so maybe it's just how they programmed their CNC machines for over in the neck. We've got our regular Nashville style bridge here, unmarked as is common in this era. So you've got these 6 holes and they just go through. There's no ferrules or anything. It's only wood contact. In fact, you can see these marks right here. That's where pressure is marring the finish. There's no grommet going all the way through. Now usually you have strings in it so you don't ever tell, but it's kind of cool because I would imagine the car has something similar because that's another vent for the engine, or so I've been told anyway. As far as our controls go, it's just a master volume, master tone, 3-way toggle switch. This lighting kind of helps show the mahogany wood grain, so I don't believe this has a maple top put on it. It was just a big mahogany slab that at start it at least had to be this thick. Kind of similar to a regular Les Paul, I would say, before they had to carve it into this shape. Which you really just have to see this thing in person to appreciate it. I just always thought it was a regular double cut and it just had this ridge. I mean, everything has been changed. It has a little bit of a bump up towards the end that you can just see when the light reflects off of it just right. However, it's subtle enough that you hardly even feel it. It's just something you have to see in person to fully appreciate. And lastly, we need to look at our 50th anniversary logo. It would have been really cool had this been a relief carving on this guitar, but no, it's just some sort of a badge. But it's cool. It has the golden 50 checkered flag and then a couple of logos. I'm not exactly sure how they attached it to the guitar, whether it's glued or if they barbed it, but I'm not curious enough to try to pry it off to find out. Condition-wise, after polishing it, it's not too bad. I did see a small ding right here. It likes to play peekaboo on you. And then there's another small one right here by our pickup channel. But moving on from our mahogany body here, let's check out our mahogany neck and rosewood fretboard. You might not have noticed this before, but it does have binding on the neck. It's just black, so it makes it very hard to see, but at the same time it helps it blend in, so it's not too in your face as like a cream binding. It's a little bit more noticeable from the side, and you got the white marker inlays. I took the time to ultra polish the frets, so these things are looking nice now. There's a bunch of gunk on the fretboard too, so that's all cleaned up as well. So you can read Corvette now. And I get it, carving a guitar like this is gonna cost a lot. But again, really wish that could have been real pearl, because it would look so much better. But at the same time, it's interesting. How many car guys out there love guitars and would actually appreciate a feature like that? And vice versa, how many guitar guys that don't care about cars would appreciate this guitar for what it is? That's the camp I personally fall in, but now that I know a little bit more about that car, and I've had time to appreciate what this truly is, you know, I'm starting to warm up to it. Don't forget, it's a 24 fret DC special. I think they did that not necessarily to make it a better playing guitar, but then they wouldn't have to have a tenon cover right here. And they utilized the P90 pickups. That way the spacing didn't look weird. So that's quite a clever thing they did there. In fact, it might be more accurate to call this thing more so based on the Doublecut Les Paul rather than the DC special it looks like. However, it doesn't have a maple top as far as what I can see, so it could go either way really. It's got your standard 12-inch fretboard radius and a 24 3/4-inch scale. As far as the rest of our neck specs, 1.69 inches at the nut width, 2.07 by the 12th. First fret neck depth of 0.88, and at the 12th, 0.95, so it does have a rather chunky neck. Here's a look at that on the contour gauge, 1st fret and 12th fret. Not huge by any means, but it is a nice rounded C shape. Something to keep in mind though is the finish is very thick on this one, so there is a little bit of a lip where the finish ends and the fretboard binding begins. Moving on to the headstock, I did find a touch-up right here. Looks like somebody dinged the edge of the guitar at one point in time and had somebody do a professional drop fill. I've definitely seen a lot worse. It's not just a marker pen, but you've got a Gibson mother of pearl logo with nothing else. It's just a bare headstock. But our truss rod's in perfect shape, and it has a blank 2-ply truss rod cover. Moving on to the back, let's take a look at this. I was thinking that this was just straight up wood and they had no metal in there, which didn't make much sense to me, but if you get it in the light just right, yep, you can see that they do have some metal grommets in there, so the strings aren't just going to pull their way all the way through, but they are leaving some impressions on the finish as we were seeing earlier. But it's really cool how this goes at an angle. Most string through guitars are sunk straight down. Now we don't have any additional badges or anything, no comfort cuts. It's pretty basic on this except for, again, the edges. It's a little bit more contoured than a regular Doublecut Gibson special. However, the backplate is completely custom. It looks like a regular Les Paul Customs one, it's just stretched a little bit. But it looks like factory solder work to me. You've got 2 Gibson branded pots, 3-way toggle switch, and then an interesting output jack. One of the barrel style. You don't see that on Gibsons too often. It just goes in at an angle on the side. Here's a look at our small channel for the wires. So they likely just go like that because it all lines up. On the back, it looks like there's a small dip in the finish right here. That looks more like a factory blemish rather than a ding. And you've got one strap button down here and the other one up on the horn. This is a good angle that you don't normally see of this guitar, just to show you how carved that top is. It's really quite chunky towards the middle, but we do have some sort of like a display scuff right here, maybe a strap did it. Then I did notice a couple of scuffs right here on the binding. As far as the rest of the edge, it's actually pretty clean. And we'll take a quick look around the other side. Onward to the back of the neck, we've got a decent sized heel, but otherwise it's just a nice ruby red finish before we get to our custom shop decal with our Grover tuners. Then again, we can see our serial number as a VIN, so VIN E03N050. Now maybe somebody in the comments can help us what this means. E03N is at the beginning of all of these, so maybe it's like a play on like that model of car or something, but then the last 3 digits tells you what number out of 50 you had. That's why we're celebrating number 50 today. That's kind of cool to have. But I was hoping this was just some sort of dirt, but no, it appears to have been impressed by something. I'm not quite sure. And then we do have a ding over here on the edge of the headstock, which is the lucky thing because you can kind of see how they did the finish. It almost looks like there's a gold base coat, but that could just be the mahogany color, but you definitely see that red tinted clear before the regular red. And if you're curious, yes, these do have headstock wings. You can just barely see the seam lines when you get it in the light just right. Now we'll do a quick blacklight test just to make sure we didn't miss any touch-ups or anything. So far, it looks good on the top, has that nice even green hue that we're looking for. Pearloid material actually glows really cool under the black light. Maybe that'd be a good way to display this thing. But here's our headstock. If you missed that touch up before, that's what a black light would help show you. But we're all good there. And our body looks good, as does our neck, especially important in the common brake area. Not really seeing any stand rash either. And here it is all strung back up. This thing was in dire need of a setup. The neck was like ridiculously banana bowed. And it's all good within spec now. And the action was just too high, so it went from abysmally playing to actually being halfway decent. But all said and done, it weighs 8 pounds, 2.7 ounces. Let me tell you, feels a lot heavier than that because all the weight is distributed to the body only. But let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this car sounds. Interesting tones out of this. The bridge pickup is like a fire breather. It really wants to attack. Whereas the neck pickup is like really dark. But yet it's still attacking at the same time. But so far, my favorite position has to be the middle, the combination of the two, because you get the clarity of the bridge with some mellowness to it. Kick on some dirt. Now that we know all about the 50th anniversary Corvette 2003 Doublecut Les Paul, whatever we want to call it, what are my final thoughts on this? Honestly, I did not enjoy playing this guitar in the slightest. It's one of those really stiff feeling ones, even though it's been set up a lot better, and I had a really hard time keeping this thing in tune. I have a hunch that it's because the strings are getting hung up on the body, so whenever you do bends, that prevents them from going back to their initial position. But I really wasn't doing that crazy of bends on this either, but they are fresh strings. I let them sit in for a day and I've stretched them, but overall this thing just feels obnoxiously heavy, despite not necessarily being all that heavy. And this emblem is right where your arm wants to rest. I wouldn't necessarily say it's sharp, but thankfully the really rounded over shoulder area makes so you don't come in contact too much with it. But I don't think this was ever designed necessarily to be heavily played. It was more so hey, I'm gonna display this by my cool fancy car that I also have here. But one thing I can say about this is it is solid as a rock. This must have been one chunky piece of mahogany. And knowing what late 90s, early 2000s mahogany looks like, there's probably some pretty cool wood grain under here. Alright, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoy your new knowledge on this rare guitar model. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.